Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This week's episode, we are telling you the top 3 things you can do to enhance your recovery, to improve your overall performance. We're also going to be diving into some additional recovery modalities that you can do once you've mastered those first 3. I'm joined tonight with Eric, Jimmy, and Andy. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
What's up, guys?
What's going on?
Everyone's doing well. Good. So let's go ahead and jump into the episode. There's a lot to unpack in this week's episode. So we're talking all about recovery. And the first thing we're going to talk about, I know is not going to be a sexy answer and probably an answer a lot of people don't want to hear. But if you are not sleeping, if you are not hydrating, and you are not recovering properly, you are never going to perform at your optimal physical levels. So we can try and do everything else in the world to try and catch up with that recovery, but we are always going to be fighting an uphill battle. Gentlemen, is there anything I'm missing with that?
Master the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of my favorite phrases people talk about all the time is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And it's funny how much that applies to so many different things in our life. But again, people want to get away from the basics of things. And thinking about this episode this week, it's if you can't master those basics, it'd be the same thing as somebody who can't goblet squat and then tries to do a heavy barbell back squat. We're just asking for a mistake, right?
One of my favorite quotes is don't major in the minors. You have to train hard to actually be able to recover from something, and you have to master the basics, which are everything that we're going to cover tonight. Like if your nutrition's off, you don't need to worry about anything else. Like if your hydration, your sleep, all those things, those are huge. Don't major in the minors. So that's one of my favorite quotes there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at those big 3. Let's go ahead and talk about number 1. We look at eating or fueling. What are we looking for when we tell somebody, hey, you have to eat to recover?
Yeah, so I like to break recovery into what I deem the 4 R's. It's just an easy way to remember. So it's going to be refueling, repairing, rehydrating, which we'll get to in a minute, and then reducing. And that refers to reducing inflammation from exercise. So with refueling, really what refueling prioritizes is replenishing your glycogen stores. So whether you fuel prior to workout or you've been naughty and you haven't fueled prior to working out, you're going to burn some level of glycogen. So it's really, really important post-exercise to immediately hop on carbohydrate replenishment so that your body, when it's optimized to do so, can replenish your glycogen fully. So that whether you have a workout later that day, a real-world mission, or a workout the next day, you know that you're 100%, because if your glycogen's not topped off, you're going to go into your next bout of physical activity at a lessened state, essentially. You've got less of a reserve tank to go off. And if you need it, you might end up bonking. That could cost your team the game. That could cost if you're a tactical athlete, someone's life on the line. We're trying to avoid that at all costs, whether it's in sport or real life situations. The next one on the list is repairing. So most people are very familiar with this aspect of recovery, right? That's going to be your amino acids coming from your proteins. During any bout of physical activity, there's going to be some level of muscle tissue breakdown. That needs to be repaired. Your body already has a minimum threshold that needs to be met with protein just to build all of your cells and, structures in your body. So when we damage muscle tissue during exercise, we obviously need extra protein to provide those amino acids in that repairing process. There's a couple key amino acids that I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with. That's the branch chain amino acids, things like leucine in particular, right? So making sure that the protein sources you're consuming throughout the day are quality sources of protein, ideally high in leucine, and ideally containing all 9 essential amino acids, unlike some plant proteins. Not that plant proteins are bad, but if we want to get the most bang for our buck, essentially with our protein feedings, we want to get complete protein. The next one on the list is rehydrate. I'll save that for later. But the final one on the list is reduce, and that's reducing inflammation. So depending on, the severity of muscle tissue breakdown or the extent and intensity of your training session, there's likely going to be some level of inflammation. Inflammation is a completely natural process. It's good. It is required by the body for healing. But we don't want inflammation to ever be chronic or ever get to a point where it now inhibits our recovery. Because if inflammation goes unchecked and it's too high, that can also impede the recovery process. So there's a couple of things you can do to reduce inflammation. The first one, which is kind of the theme of the night, is not very sexy. It's extremely simple, and it's just making sure you eat a varied, well-balanced diet throughout the day that contains a lot of colors. Those colors contain the phytochemicals, things like polyphenols. That is what's deemed like an anti-inflammatory diet, right? So whole grains, fruits, vegetables, all the stuff that you've probably heard for years. That is the first step. But then there are some more nuanced things you could try to implement throughout the day that also will help reduce inflammation. So I actually brought a prop because I'm recovering from my race. Tart cherry juice is one of the secret foods, if you will, that has been shown scientifically to help reduce post-exercise muscle soreness, right? So that tart cherry juice is so high in polyphenols, right? These plant compounds, these phytonutrients, that it's been shown to tamp down that inflammation and help reduce that post-exercise muscle soreness. Another one would be extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil has a compound called oleocanthal. That is, it's not the equivalent of ibuprofen, but it has such a profound anti-inflammatory effect that it's compared to ibuprofen. So getting extra virgin olive oil in your macro split for fat, trying to get some extra virgin olive oil in every day, very helpful. And then things like turmeric. Turmeric, paired with black pepper also has an anti-inflammatory effect. So doing all of those little things, relatively simple, right? It's no pill, it's nothing sexy. I did forget one thing. The other one would be your omega-3 fatty acids, like a fish oil. That also has an anti-inflammatory effect. But nonetheless, it's nothing sexy. You're not having to do, some whatever stack of crazy supplements that some influencer online is trying to sell you. Most of it, in fact, all of it can really be found in a grocery store. Even fish oil, right, is coming from fish. You could simply eat salmon and get the same effect as taking a fish oil. All this stuff can be bought at the grocery store. Save your money. You do not need all this expensive snake oil out there. And yeah, master the basics, which we are going to cover all throughout tonight.
Yeah, Eric, I remember hearing a dietitian talk years ago when I was first getting into the field. And one of the things he was trying to do with his clients was get them away from even shakes at the beginning. He was trying to get them all on, hey, all your macros and your micros are coming from what you're eating. So don't just rely on that shake. Get used to eating a meal after you get done training, which obviously everyone has the appetite to eat once they get done training. So shakes can be very beneficial there. Is that something you try to instill with your guys as well?
It's very situational dependent. I mean, the priority is fueling, right? So if somebody isn't hungry, or if somebody's like running from the gym to the office or to pick up a kid and a shake is the only thing they can get down, then a shake's the best option for that individual. If that individual is working out in their basement, like I have here, and they can go upstairs and prepare a fresh meal post-exercise, then yes, like if we can get the majority of the diet to be whole food based, that's always like the ideal, right? That's the standard we want to try to uphold. But if we have to fall a little short of that, it's still better than like not eating post-workout at all. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't eat for 2 hours after my exercise because I had to do X, Y, or Z. And really in this day and age, there's no excuse for that, right? Because yes, you can pack a shake. You can pack a packaged food item. People are really scared of processed foods, and I understand why. But sometimes anything is better than nothing. And that is especially true when it comes to recovery post-exercise. Does that answer your question, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Eric, just to piggyback off that, as far as you touched on BCAAs, I know that kind of a lot of people kind of go back and forth with it. Is it worth the money? Things like that. What is your opinion of BCAAs?
Yeah, so BCAAs as a standalone product, I wouldn't waste your money with, because all complete protein sources like whey isolate is going to contain all the BCAAs anyways. But in addition to the BCAAs, you get the other 6 essential amino acids. So when you consume simply BCAAs as a standalone product, you're missing an opportunity to get 6 other really important amino acids that your body needs. So if you're already going to take the time to put a scoop of something into water, it would be better served to be something like whey isolate.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that's the same reason why collagen isn't a great supplement for protein in particular, because collagen is missing tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid. So again, now collagen, that's like a topic for another day. It does contain some amino acids that like whey protein won't contain. But when it comes to the 9 essential amino acids and muscle building and muscle repair post-exercise, collagen is not a great option.
And then just to clarify, Erik, when you say inflammation, I think our audience may think, oh, my tendon is inflamed in my knee, or my shoulder is inflamed after bench or something like that. Is that what you mean by inflammation, or are you more referring about the systemic inflammation on the cellular level?
Yeah, great question, Andy. So what you described first with like tendons being inflamed or knee pain, that would be a very physical manifestation of inflammation, right? That's something that somebody's very acutely aware of because it's causing them pain. Maybe there's swelling involved and you can actually see it. That is for sure inflammation we want to tamp down. But there are lesser degrees of inflammation, like you mentioned, on a cellular level or systemically throughout the body, right? And that can be measured through blood markers like CPK and things like that. Those are lesser, they're markers that you would be less attuned to. It's going on inside without really manifesting itself in a way like a physical injury, but it's still happening. Now, to what degree is it acceptable and to what degree is it, too much? That's really hard to tell. Obviously, if you have a physical knee injury and something's swollen to a point where it's not good, we want to take control of that right away. Did that answer your question, Andy?
Yep, I just throwing it out there for clarification.
Absolutely.
And Erik, I got one more for you. The olive oil, because that intrigues me as well. What type of like total quantity are we looking for in olive oil?
So anything's better than nothing. And obviously it's totally going to be dependent on everything in nutrition is contextual, and the context is going to be what else you eat throughout the day. So everyone has a bucket of calories to fit all of their macros within. Let's say it's 3,000 for sake of argument. Let's say they're trying to hit 20% fat total for, as low as we can go for fat. So we've got room for carbs and protein. Well, 20% for most people, total fat isn't a ton to work with. So if you already are consuming things like eggs in the morning and you're consuming a lot of animal-based products like dairy and meat, your window of fat that is relatively small. So you may be able to consume less extra virgin olive oil than somebody that, let's say, doesn't eat eggs in the morning or limits dairy or doesn't eat as much meat. So it has to fit within your fat. And then from that point on, I'd say anywhere between 1 to 4 tablespoons a day would be recommended. I think for the Mediterranean diet in particular, they recommend 4 tablespoons a day. The Mediterranean diet in general is lower in protein typically, right? So you're eating less animal products and you have that extra room for fat. Whereas most people that are training at a high level have a lot more calories allocated towards protein and carbohydrates. And protein in particular, typically the best sources come inconveniently paired with fat. And that eats into people's fat budgets relatively quickly.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
But yeah, 1 to 4 tablespoons, anywhere in there is solid.
Cool.
I remember in football, some of our guys trying to gain weight, we used to try to make them take olive oil shots just because all the calories you get from it. But I really like what you said in there about looking for the colors on your plate. If you are not an expert in nutrition and you throw a lot of big words out there, and I know some of the viewers are going to be like, dude, I have no idea what the hell that is. I think it's very simple to just look at your plate. Hey, look for that rainbow on your plate. And if you're brand new to it, I think it's a very good place to start. And like we said, keep it simple. So if you look at your plate and it's nothing but brown, we're missing a lot of things on there. So look for that rainbow on that plate. So cool. So that's number 1, looking at eating or fueling. The next thing we want to master is our sleep. And this is something that is so important that so many people take for granted. As I've gotten older, I look at it now, though, if I don't get the hours that I need, I think the next day is already shot. So let's dive into talk about what sleeping for recovery truly looks like.
Cool. All right. I'm going to breeze through this as fast as I can because I want to leave time for discussion. But to boil it down, sleep is the most anabolic thing you can do that doesn't involve a barbell or a syringe, period. If you want to get big, if you want to build muscle, you can't do it without proper sleep. When you go to sleep, you typically drop into different stages of sleep, which a lot of people know: REM sleep, light sleep, deep sleep. Well, in deep sleep, right after you go to bed, that's when growth hormone is released. In fact, 70% of your daily GH it comes when you are in that deep sleep. So if you don't hit deep sleep, you're missing out on the growth hormone release. Also, in REM sleep, which is a different wave of sleep, that's when memory consolidation and neural recalibration happens. That's when all the skill-based things that you've been doing, all the learning that you've been doing gets basically solidified. So think about any skill you're trying to master, whether you're trying to shoot a pistol or you're trying to learn Farsi language or Arabic, okay? When you do that, imagine your brain is like a giant forest, okay? And if you've ever been deer hunting, you know when you come across a deer path, okay? That a deer path doesn't occur when one deer goes across that one path. It happens when multiple deer do it several times over the course of weeks or months. Similarly, that's what happens when you are developing a skill or trying to build a memory, is you are walking an animal through the woods, or you yourself are walking through the woods, and you're creating that path. Once that path is created, then the skill sticks, okay? But that can't happen unless you get into REM sleep, okay? So very important that you get enough sleep to get into REM. What happens when you cut sleep? Well, uh, if you cut sleep just like one night of sleep deprivation, your leg press strength can go down by 17%, for instance. You get 5 hours of sleep per night. Maybe you typically get 6 and you think you're good. If you drop down to 5 hours per night for a week, studies have shown that your testosterone is going to drop by 15%. Okay. If you try to burn it from both ends for a day and you stay awake for, say, like 17 to 19 hours straight, your cognitive function is going to be impaired to the level of being legally drunk in some states. And then bottom line is, if you're sleep deprived, you're going to be at increased risk of injury. When I say sleep deprived, I mean if you're getting less than 6 hours per night, you're almost twice as likely to get injured than if you weren't. All right. Obviously, I already mentioned the skill development. If you don't get your sleep, all that pistol play that you're doing, all that language stuff you're doing, that just goes down the tubes. So tactics for how to get better sleep. Number one, and this is the most important one. It's one that you never hear people talk about, and that is time management. Okay, you have to budget 8 to 9 hours. You have to tell the wife, no, we're not watching crime TV tonight. I got to go to bed. You got to tell a kid, get your bath done, get your teeth brushed, and go to bed so I can go to bed. You got to stop doom scrolling on your phone for a half hour every night. Somehow, some way, you have got to find those minutes and hours in your day to cut in order to make time to sleep. So that's the most important thing, is time management. Next thing is a wind down routine. This can be like 30 to 60 minutes. Try no screens for an hour before bed, or get blue light blocking glasses. You can get on Amazon pretty cheap for like $40, and you can block out the blue light. With that blue light knocked out, your melatonin is going to go up, and it's what's going to cause you to want to go to sleep. Another hack is taking a hot shower and then going into your cool bedroom. So crank up the AC in your room, bring the temperature down to somewhere between 63 and 68, and then take a hot shower, and then try to go to bed. What that's going to do is that onset of wanting to cool your body down is what's going to make it easier to go to sleep. And then invest in some blackout curtains. If you need to, take a the cardboard from a case of beer and duct tape it up on the window. I'm not saying this from experience, I promise. To out the light, then that's what you got to do. But you got to keep that light out. There's been studies shown that if you put somebody in a completely dark room, you cover their eyes so they can't see any light, and you shine a flashlight on their leg, it will disturb their sleep waves. Okay, so light is very important to get it out. Knock out the caffeine by say like noon or 2 o'clock at the latest. Again, I'm the biggest hypocrite here. Mea culpa, mea culpa. I try to do it. I don't always succeed, but go ahead and give that a try. Magnesium supplementation can help. I'll let Erik talk about that. And then don't be afraid to take naps during the day. I know it's kind of poo-pooed upon, but naps can be really, really effective for improving alertness, improving cognitive function. A 20-minute nap could save you what would have been an hour or two of non-productivity. So don't be afraid to take those naps. I'm going to leave it there and just open it up for all you guys now.
Yeah. So you talked about the 8 to 9 hours. So for somebody like me, I think that simply just comes down to discipline. Single guy in his 30s, have my dog, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning for work. So that truthfully just comes down to discipline. When I look at guys like Erik and Jimmy, who have so many other factors at home, how do you guys find the time to get the sleep you need in?
Erik, you want to go first?
Yeah, so with a 6-month-old in the house, sleep has definitely been a challenge. But to Andy's point, sleep is always something that I prioritize when possible. It's always one of the things that I build the rest of my day around. So it's one of the first things I block off. I always, at a minimum, try to block off 8 hours. Whether the baby's up in that window is another story, but at least, let's say on a great day, the baby can sleep through the night, which doesn't happen a lot. But when it does, I have that time blocked off. So in addition to that, I do exactly as Andy says, right? Before bed, no screen time. I try to read a physical book, and I have a very dim reading light that I have next to my bed. So I can just read a couple pages, and that really helps me fall asleep. Definitely noticed a huge improvement. I was 100%, especially back in my Marine Corps days and immediately following, doom scrolling, just hanging out on my cell phone and then like putting it down. And then the next thing you know, there's a million things running through your brain. There's already a million things running through your brain. You don't need a million more introduced from an external source. You've got all your own personal thoughts as it is. So reading just a really simple book can help your mind stay focused on a singular thing. This is not scientific. This is just something I found. When I'm focused in on a book and I try to read something, fictional, just something kind of like nonsensical because if I read an educational book, the gears really start turning more and I want to read more. I start having more questions and I want to go to Google to follow up. If I just read some nonsense fiction book, like Gates of Fire, something badass, like, all right, I'm focused in on this whole, different world, man, a couple pages in and I'm out. And that has been a huge help for me. But really the main thing is I block the time off. I hope to get it before the baby. That is exactly what I did. And I did sleep those 8 hours every night. And that meant sacrificing, right? Just like meal prepping, when you block off 8 to 9 hours of sleep, that means you're going to sacrifice that crime TV with your wife or maybe something with friends or whatever. But as an athlete that you need that sleep, especially if you want to perform your best. So it's totally up to you. How dedicated are you to your craft and how motivated are you to be better? Because if you're saying that you're super motivated and you're super dedicated, the proof's in the pudding. Are you getting that sleep? Are you budgeting time to sleep and meal prep and these things? So absolutely. Andy hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So I'm the biggest I'm not a hypocrite of it because I don't preach it as much as I should. But Andy, you might have inspired me to try to do a better job. Out of all aspects of performance, sleep is the toughest one for me because after the craziness of the day with family, work, things like that, I want to spend time with my wife at night. I won't sacrifice that. I'd rather be a little tired the next day, and I'm going to figure it out and I'll do it. But I obviously understand all the science and the research, hormones and everything like that. But just me personally, I need to get more sleep, probably like a lot of people listening to this. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sacrifice things that are important to me. Yes, training and health is always important, but so is my family and spending some time. But when I can, I try to do a good job of it. But it's rare that I'm getting 8 hours of sleep a night. So unless I fall asleep putting my kids to bed, and luckily I get 8 hours of sleep, but most of the time it's not that. At least 6. I shoot for 6. But yeah, Andy, you brought up some great points, and you inspired me. So hopefully the people listening would be inspired as well.
Thank you. I was hoping Ben might share that story you were talking about before we went on camera about the guy who thought he was just fine getting 4 hours of sleep a night, and then go ahead, you finish the story.
Oh, yeah. So we all work with individuals who say like, oh, I operate perfectly fine on 4 hours of sleep, or my body's adapted to just getting 4 hours of sleep. And they go through their whole career operating off that sleep. So I was talking to somebody this morning actually about what we are discussing tonight. And he made a comment about his whole time as a young Marine, he was operating off 4 hours of sleep. And this guy is pretty physically impressive when it comes to his run times, overall strength. And he said, I was a hell of a Marine operating off 4 hours of sleep every single night. And then he brought up that once he got out and actually fully recovered, the things he was able to do physically was night and day different than when he thought he was recovered off those 4 hours of sleep.
And it's a good point, because when you think about anybody in the military, police, fire, they're going to be sleep deprived. Obviously, Erik, you can speak to this, but it's funny, we preach these things, but when guys, if you're talking about tactical population and military, when they're in the States and they can control the sleep and get as much sleep as they want, that's great. But then it's out of their hands when they're overseas. So that is challenging because they don't have a choice. So I'd be curious, Erik, your thoughts on that, because yeah, it sounds great to go have my 8 hours of sleep, but overseas when things are going on, you don't have that luxury. So, and that's
without a doubt. And I think, it's so awesome that these days there are resources like Modern Athlete, or if you scroll through Instagram, of course, there's always bad that comes with good, but there are so many great sources of information that I wish I would have had at my disposal when I was in the Marine Corps, especially at that age and with the culture and with the job itself. Yeah, it's kind of the mindset of sleep. I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? I don't need sleep. Like, I can push through. It's almost like a badge of honor. Like, oh yeah, I can go do a freaking 20K hike on like 1 hour of sleep and a 6-pack of beer, and it's just, that's like proves my toughness, which obviously is kind of like ass backwards thinking. But kind of going back to what I said before, I think ideally what you do is you set, the gold standard, right? This is what I would like to try to achieve. And when life dictates otherwise, you kind of adapt and overcome and you go with the flow. There aren't going to be, perfect nights. There's going to be nights where you're on patrol all night, and then you got to try to sleep during the day, but there aren't blackout curtains when you're in the fob, right? So there's sunlight peeking through the plywood and yada, yada, yada. So you do the best you can. You have a plan, and then you have contingencies, right? So, all right, if I can't sleep 8 hours, like maybe I can try to sneak in a nap when I'm on a break period, right? Or something along those lines. Everything comes down to proper planning. You've got plan A, but then you also know exactly what you're going to do when plan A fails. Sleep's no different. It's the same as nutrition. But yeah, I mean, it is very, very true that in the military, a lot of times plan A won't work out, right? And it's hard to stay optimal in all aspects.
Just out of curiosity, when it comes to sleep, and this is obviously a big one going around now, have any of you guys ever tried the mouth tape?
Yes, I have not.
I read a great book called Breathe that has an entire section on nasal breathing and its importance during sleep, and it did mention the tape. I've never used it because I don't wake up with like super nasty dry mouth. I'm pretty confident I nasal breathe at night, but yeah, I've heard a lot of good things from people that knew they were mouth breathers, use the tape, and it drastically improved their sleep.
Andy, what did you think of it?
I go off and on. Sometimes I use it, sometimes you don't. Another term for the tape is called hostage tape, because it looks like you've been taken hostage. If you have like severe allergies and you get stuffed up in the middle of the night, it may not be the greatest idea, but a misnomer is that you can't breathe through your mouth. it will, most good hostage tape, it'll have a little sliver to where you can breathe through your mouth if necessary. One of the interesting things that happen though is sometimes I'll get a slightly stuffy nose and I'll put the hostage tape on and I'll be able to go to bed and I'll wake up and the nasal passages will be cleared. It's like my body like knows that because I can't breathe through my mouth, it better clear out whatever in my nasal passages. So uh, yeah, I do think I've never had a bad night's rest when I've had hostage tape on, but I can tell you I've had plenty of bad night's rest where I haven't had it on.
No, that's interesting. I wanted to try it. I remember looking it up one day, and I thought the price to just tape my mouth. I thought it was like, I'll dive a little deeper into this before I actually pay for it. But yeah, I'd like to try it out. So
The other thing to bring up is if you're a snorer or your significant other tells you that you have a little bit of sleep apnea, get that taken care of. Like go to the doc and get the sleep study. Make sure it's covered because it could be expensive out of pocket. But I got a CPAP about a year ago, and it changed my life. It like changed my life, like religious conversion type changed my life. Um, I got 4 hours of sleep the first night on my CPAP, and I felt like it was the best night's rest I had gotten since I was a baby. So, it can be a little cumbersome up front to get the doctor's appointment and get the sleep study, and you'll probably have to do one or two sleep studies. But if you need it, you're gonna be thankful that you did it, and your spouse or significant other is going to be happy that you did it because they're going to be able to sleep better than too.
nice. Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. So we've gone over some of the basics for nutrition, now sleep, and looking at the last of the big three, how do we go about hydrating for recovery?
Yeah, so hydration again, and I always hate to be the guy that's like, there's no simple answer, but it's really individual. Your hydration needs are very individualized to you. Your sweat rate comes into account, and whether or not you are a salty sweater comes into account. Your environment comes into account. There's so many variables that go into hydrating properly. So if you really want to be like next level dialed in, you can do something like sweat testing. There's a couple different options for that. You can do like the Gatorade sweat patch. All you have to do is buy the patches, get the free app on your phone. You will sweat through the patch, and then your phone will read the chip and tell you at least some basics, right? How many electrolytes you're losing and what, magnitude. The number one thing is sodium. That is by and far the nutrient loss the most in our sweat. You see products like LMNT and other rehydration products, they're going to contain things like potassium and magnesium. And yes, those nutrients are important. But when it comes to sweating, sweat is the lion's share of the nutrients you're losing. So if we do want to offer some very generic advice, making sure, especially if you sweat heavily, consuming some sodium post-workout. And it can be as simple as adding a quarter teaspoon of salt to your post-exercise meal. You can even throw that in your protein shake, right? If you really feel like you sweat heavily, just do a quarter teaspoon of salt in your protein shake or your post-recovery meal, and that should be an adequate amount to replenish. I think on average per hour, it would be like most people sweat either 300 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium out per hour. So somewhere in that range, if you really want to be, safe. Some things you can do without sweat testing would be as simple as exercising with a black t-shirt on, letting it dry, and seeing how much white staining you have on the t-shirt. That would be very indicative of how much salt you're losing. Most people are familiar with sweat rings. Some people would be shocked at what a really salty sweater can produce in like black clothing, a black ball cap or a t-shirt. And then some people don't lose a ton of sodium in their sweat. So they might have some salt rings, but not a lot. Now, obviously, it's very subjective. You're looking at something without measuring it. But nonetheless, you can tell like, oh, wow, like it should shock you. Like I'm losing a ton of salt if you're just covered up in salt stains. So if you are somebody that is a salty sweater, obviously you can approach the higher end of that range for sodium replenishment. And then obviously fluid, right? Like we need to be consuming enough water. So I think the easiest way to gauge hydration status is simply urine color, right? We want our urine to be not completely clear, maybe just a hint of straw color. So there should be some yellow tint to it, but it should be very close to clear. If you can maintain a urine color like that throughout the day, that is a really good indication that you are staying hydrated. So going back to sleep, going back to nutrition, it's simple habits you need to form. Carry a water bottle with you everywhere you go. You should always have access to water. There should be no excuse that you're not consuming enough water, of course, unless you're forward deployed and shit hits the fan. And, those are extraneous examples. Most people, when you're stateside, have no problem carrying adequate water on person, and therefore there should be no excuse to be not hydrated enough. Depending what your diet looks like, you're almost certainly consuming enough sodium already in your diet. If you are a perfectly clean eater, meaning you cook every meal and snack from scratch, and you are the only person dictating how much sodium is in your diet, then you can just measure it out, right? Every quarter teaspoon is about 500 milligrams. You're shooting for, let's say, 2,000 to 3,000 a day on average, plus that 300 to 1,000 for every hour of physical activity. But in general, just be very acutely aware of signs of dehydration, thirst, dry lips, right? The extremes being nauseated, right? Feeling dizzy. If you're in tune with what dehydration feels like, you'll know how to avoid it, because as soon as the onset starts approaching, oh, wow, I'm really thirsty. Yeah, time to drink some water. So it's just practice, right? Carrying the water bottle around, staying hydrated, feeling what it's like to be adequately hydrated, because as soon as you're not, you're going to know, because you're so used to your baseline of being hydrated. The minute you become slightly dehydrated, your body will tell you.
Yeah, so we look at the summer months that we're in right now. Do you have a general rule of thumb of, where we're at right now has been, the past couple of weeks has just been super humid. This week, the humidity's backed off a little bit, but it's been mid 90s. Do you have a general rule of thumb that you're giving individuals when we see these temperature changes, or maybe even going up to 4,500 feet elevation?
Yeah, so nothing really outside of what I just said, right? Because sodium is one of these things that you have to be really careful with, right? Of course, it would be easy to say, well, just consume a bunch of excess sodium just to be on the safe side. But what we know in healthcare is that an overconsumption of sodium, where your body doesn't actually need that much, consistently over time is almost guaranteed to lead to high blood pressure. High blood pressure is then almost guaranteed to lead to cardiovascular risk factors down the road, things like heart attack, stroke. So that's why products like LMNT, I'm like very cautious with, because they're marketing to everybody. They're like, everybody needs more salt, 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 salt. And like, if you're just going to Planet Fitness for 45 minutes and sitting on a freaking machine and you're not even breaking a sweat, you don't need 1,000 milligram LMNT post workout. Now, if you're in training camp for football in August and you're down south, yeah, you probably need 2 LMNTs to replenish that sodium. So again, it's really hard to offer completely generic advice because every person's situation is so unique. So it's just getting well versed in those signs of dehydration, making sure your urine color stays really close to clear as often as possible. And if you can do that, you're going to be set up. Now, yes, if you go overboard on sodium occasionally, not a big deal. So for example, if you are a clean eater, you're not eating a ton of salt, and you have a super heavy training session where you sweat a lot and you don't want to pay attention, you just want to drink an LMNT, yeah, not a problem. It's just different if you do it every single day and your body doesn't need it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I was kind of more so thinking on the sense of like, last time you were on here, we discussed, carbohydrates to kilograms, however many hours out from your race. Is there anything you're looking for with fluid ounces with kilograms like per day? And then now you're at elevation, maybe if we were looking for, you were trying to hit 100 fluid ounces per day, now your elevation, maybe you're up to 115. I think that was kind of more so where I was talking about like any rule of thumb there.
There are rules of thumb, like you could do 30 mils per kilogram and things like that. The problem is in practice, it doesn't seem to work that well because some people need more than that. Some people might even need less than that. The easiest thing to remember again, and I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, and I apologize that I don't have some really convenient trick or, equation to use, but your urine color, like just focus on that. If your urine is freaking dark yellow, like you're dehydrated, right? That could even happen if you are following those rules. It just totally depends on the environment, yes, the elevation, and your personal sweat rate. So sorry that it can't be super simple, but just follow that urine color and make sure you're not having things like dry cracking lips, dry mouth, nausea, muscle cramping, things like that.
No, yeah, I think it's a good point to bring up because I have heard people before say, like, hey, this is what you need. But to your point there, it could differ by your situation just because you hit X amount. And if your urine color is still not where it needs to be, you obviously need to hydrate more or maybe get more sodium in there. So, no, I think it's a good point to bring up just because you
like
hit a
I'm
number
sure everyone's
doesn't mean
heard,
shit.
right? Drink 8 cups of water every day, right? Like that is a wives' tale. But you'll never hear a dietitian say that because we know that it's so unique based on the individual. And God forbid you tell somebody to consume 8 cups of water when they needed freaking 20, and now they like are in serious health complications because they're so dehydrated. They're like, well, that dietitian told me I only need 8 cups a day. It's like, oh yeah, you want to be careful from saying things in absolutes.
Hey, Eric, could you speak to how hydration and sleep intersect? We're specifically thinking about when do you stop drinking water so that you're not waking up 10 times in the night to pee? And if you do that and you wake up and you do have yellow urine, is that something that you try to avoid? Is it something that you just try and pound water right when you wake up? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure. Now, almost everybody is going to urinate in a darker tone color in the morning after a full 8 hours of sleep. Your body and your kidneys are working really hard to get rid of all the waste products in your body. And yes, you are in a period where you're not consuming water. Now, if you are in a proper sleep cycle, your brain should shut off the part, I think it's the hypothalamus, but don't hold me to it. There's a region in your brain essentially that will shut off your body's need to urinate. Okay, so if you are sleeping properly and deeply enough, you should still be able to consume fluid up to bedtime, and your body should basically shut off the need to urinate that will actually wake you up. That's why if you get, I'm sure everyone's experienced it, but you wake up after a full 8 hours and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to take a piss. Your body shut off your response to urinate. Like during the day, your body would never let you go that long, right? You just be like, oh, I got to go take a piss, like halfway to that point. So should you be sleeping properly, your body should shut off that response, and you should be able to basically entirely fill your bladder and empty at the end of the day. But yes, if you are somebody that wakes up constantly to pee and it's really interrupting your sleep, you can absolutely taper your hydration off towards the end of the day. You just want to make sure that you're not also active towards the end of the day, right? Like you don't want to taper off your hydration and then go do something that's going to cause you to sweat a bunch because that might put you in a sticky situation. If you're just lounging at the house, you're in a climate controlled environment, absolutely feel free to taper off some of your hydration. You could even do something like eating a fibrous food, something like, an apple, right? It's going to inherently carry some level of hydration with it and then slowly disseminate itself, empty out of your stomach, empty your small intestine. That way you're kind of like time releasing a bit of hydration over the first couple hours of sleep.
I like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, absolutely. So now we've gone over the basics of eating, nutrition, sleep, and now hydration. Again, like I said at the very beginning, it's not sexy, but it's the things we need to do to be able to fully recover and to reach our potential. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the fun stuff that people see. So once we've mastered those three and we start to throw in other modalities of recovery, what are some good ones that we want to throw in there? And maybe what's the purpose for some of these recovery modalities?
Well, if you're not doing the first three, then you should turn this off right now if you're watching this, and then just rewatch and start doing the first three. Because, yeah, these things are cool, but I can tell you right off the bat, I don't really do any of these. So, like, cold exposure is great. So, whether it's ice tubs, cryotherapy, things like that, sauna therapy, all those things are great. The things that I do use for recovery are foam rollers. I've even used massage guns and things like that before as well. But at the end of the day, I'm going to prioritize those other three. Yeah, and if you have access to those modalities, cold tubs, saunas, things like that, absolutely, they're great to use. But don't be using it if you're not on a structured training plan. You're not executing a structured training plan. And there's no point of using something for recovery, in my opinion, if it's not consistent. Like I believe in, I've talked about this on other YouTube lives and things like that. Consistency matters for everything, whether it's your training, whether it's your nutrition, hydration, sleep, all those things are the most important. So doing one ice bath every like 6 weeks, in my opinion, there's no point. Don't do it if you can't be consistent and compliant with it. So that's my biggest take on it. So if I were to prioritize any of them, I think foam rolling and myofascial release are great because that's usually easy for access, whether it's foam rollers or even massage guns. Helps with short-term soreness, gets the blood flow in the tissue, helps with mobility, things like that. Most people don't warm up properly or cool down. So if you implement foam rolling, it will aid in recovery. And it's also good because, like I said, most people don't do it. Same thing with massage guns. Same concept. You can kind of pinpoint certain areas. They'll help for the short term, but again, they got to be consistent. You can't just foam roll or massage gun once a week and expect to feel great every single session. As far as cold exposure, if you have access to a cold tub, I think it's great. I think most of the recommendations based on research are about 10 to 15 minutes at like 50 to 59 degrees. I know all over social media, you see guys completely shivering in 40 or sub 40 degree temperatures. I don't think that's necessary for most people. The other reason why I like cold exposure is less about recovery, more about just doing uncomfortable things. I've done cold showers before, not because I think it's going to help my recovery. I've just done it because it sucks and nobody's going to know about it. But I like doing hard things that I'm not telling anybody about, which I'm going against that right now, obviously, because I'm telling you I do that. But you know what I mean? So like I like doing the uncomfortable cold exposures. I think that is a good thing for most people in a world where everything's comfortable. Well, we talked about it a couple of YouTube lives ago, Ben and Andy, about like heated steering wheels, heated seats, all those things. We lived in this like comfortable nest. So I think it's good.
The fan on the treadmill.
Exactly. I think it's good.
Valorizing the dad bod.
Exactly. Don't get me started again.
I was doing a run a couple Saturdays ago on the treadmill, and it was one of the days the humidity was up there, and I was probably like 50 minutes in, and I see the fan. I'm just like, I can't do it. I was like, I can't do it. I was like, as badly as I want to right now, cannot do it.
Yes, that's why I like the cold exposure. As far as the sauna, it helps with circulation, promotes recovery and everything like that. It also increases shock proteins, which support muscle repair for mitochondrial function and things like that. The recommendation for time for that is usually 15 to 30 minutes, and I believe it's 170 degrees to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit exposure there. But again, don't use that if you're not drinking any water, because then you're already going to be dehydrated, like Erik already spoke about. The one that I use in college a little bit when I was a strength coach in college was cryotherapy. But again, I don't think it's essential by any means because it is expensive. That's one of the biggest downfalls. That's basically, I think it's negative 200 degrees for like 2 to 3 minute exposures. Most people don't have the resources and things like that. So, but that is another modality out there. What else we got? Foam rolling I talked about, but I'm sure, Andy, I know you do a lot of recovery stuff on your own. You want to talk about anything that you do as far as like needling or anything like that?
Yeah, dry needling is definitely good if you have the access to somebody who can do that for you on the cheap. It's good. One of the things that I thought of that a lot of people don't really mention is quick mindfulness meditations. I know some people can think that it's soft or that it's whatever, it's not very manly or tough or macho or whatever. I get all that. But if you can just get one of the apps that are out there, the Calm app, the whatever, and do like 2 minutes of mindfulness meditation right when you wake up, and then 2 minutes right when you go to bed. You do not have to sit on a rug and face east and be in the lotus position for an hour. Okay, you don't need to be Mr. Miyagi. Just 2 minutes right when you wake up, 2 minutes right before you go to bed. And I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised about how focused you feel in the morning and then how much it improves your sleep at night.
Yeah, no, that's great. Another simple one that's not sexy is just movement. So I know Ben has talked about this a lot on previous ones, but I don't like taking quote unquote off days. I like to move every single day because one day I'm not going to have the ability to do so. So I want to take advantage of when I can. It doesn't mean I'm working out every single day, but I try to, at minimum, at least walk a mile. Like at minimum, just walk a mile, get my body moving, promoting circulation, and just it's good for your brain, it's good for your body. I know, Ben, you've talked about like different crawling patterns or just dynamic warm ups, just basic, just getting your body moving. One of my favorite quotes is if you rest, you rust. Well, that's why I take that to heart. So just keep your body moving. So, because I'm sure everybody's felt it. I'm sure Andy in college, after playing a football game or something like that, or squatting on a Friday, and then you don't do anything over the weekend, most of the time you feel worse on Monday. Whereas if you just move and do something, you'll feel a lot better. So that's an easy one that you don't need specialized equipment. You don't need cold tubs, cryo chambers, things like that. So if I were to piggyback off the three that we already spoke about, just general movement will aid in recovery. And I think that's important. So
Yeah, I absolutely love movement for recovery. You know, for one, taking the shoes off and just walking on grass, getting some movement in there, I think is huge. But those days where you actually don't move, like if you go on a Sunday, you don't move, I feel like absolute shit on Monday. Like, and it's hard to get going at work. Like, it's awful. So I'm the same way. If I'm taking a day off from training, I still want to get out and move. For me, I'll roughly try and hit between 7,000, 10,000 steps on a day that I'm not training, just getting out and moving. So maybe that looks like I'm taking my dog for a 3 mile walk first thing Sunday morning. But yeah, get out and move. Don't just sit there. What was that? If you don't move, you rust. I'm messing that up, right?
um, if you rest, you rust.
If you rest, you rust. Yeah, that motionless lotion, I think those are both phenomenal for getting out and just moving.
Yeah, and from like a nutritional aspect, right? It makes logical sense. So you do damage to your body when you exercise. Okay, let's say it's in your quadriceps. Okay, muscle tissue is broken down after a heavy leg day. Well, if you sit around and rest, right, your blood flow is going to be moving really slowly to that area. Well, in order for that muscle tissue to be repaired, building blocks need to get delivered through your vascular system to that region that was injured. That is why movement is so crucial, is because it really helps the nutrients get to where they're going in a timely manner so your body can do what it's built to do: repair, keep moving forward. And going back, and I'm going to stay in my lane. This is your guys' area of expertise, but correct me if I'm wrong. I've been under the impression that things like cold therapy and saunas and foam rolling, the reason that it can be helpful in recovery is because it can get you out of a level of pain so that you can move. So like if you're too sore to move, it's going to impede your recovery because you're resting, you're not moving. But if a cold plunge can reduce that inflammation and get you out of a pain state to allow you then to go for a walk, that will then improve your recovery. Same with foam rolling. If you're so stiff and tight and foam rolling loosens you up to go on a light jog or a walk, your recovery improves. Same with sauna. I'd say sauna's the outlier because a sauna will get your blood pumping without actually moving, right? Just based on the heat. But at the end of the day, it's all the same thing. It's all getting those nutrients to where they're going to start the repair process.
Yes, 100%. And with cold therapy too, that brings up a good point. There's now research that suggests that you don't want to do it right after a heavy strength training session. You'd want to do it either on your off days or conditioning days or high volume conditioning days, ideally. In college, we would use it post practice and things like that, but it can blunt the recovery process for hypertrophy. So if
Right.
your goal is hypertrophy, you don't want to just do a high volume squat session and jump right in the cold tub because then you're going to diminish those returns of hypertrophy. So
Right. And if you think about it logically, when you're in that cold tub, right, your blood is going to rush to your vital organs to keep your body alive. And that means blood is not flowing to the muscle tissues that you just damaged.
yes, so that protein shake you drank right after the workout is nowhere to go because
Yeah.
you jumped in a cold tub. And I think timing is important with that. It's definitely important with that, but then also for foam rolling, some people ask, is it good before, after? And in strength and conditioning, everybody's heard this, and even in nutrition, like it does depend. Like if your goal is to just get blood flow because you're sore and things like that, you want to do it before. Maybe it's just enhanced recovery afterward, get the blood moving and work some mobility, do it after. So either one is absolutely fine. But yeah, that's my stance on some of those. And feel free anybody to chime in if there's any other sexy recovery modality that I didn't touch on. Feel free to throw that out there.
Well, and to go to the foam rolling part, I heard this a couple years back, and I thought it was a great reason why to use the foam roller, because people will knock it definitely at times. But if I'm somebody, I'm going to squat, maybe my calves are super tight, I'm foam rolling, which now allows me to get in the depth. Yes, then it's putting a purpose for me right then and there. So now I can squat to depth. That is so much better than me just being like, well, I'm not going to foam roll, and now I'm not hitting the depth that I need to on a squat. So there's definitely, so all these tools, when used properly, it's a time and place for it. But again, that only comes if you are doing the first three correctly and consistently.
100% agree.
Going to the ice baths, Jimmy and Andy, did you guys in college have to sit there and fill up those black troughs with ice during fall camp as you're trying to beat the heat and shit's just melting so quickly?
Yeah.
I hated that. My last year at Troy, they built a cold tub in the facility, and I was just so thankful for that one. That was so much better than being in Alabama in July trying to fill up those black troughs with ice. And especially at a mid-major, you didn't have much help.
Yeah.
So you're like running back and forth. So
yeah. We at the smaller schools, I was running back and forth with bags. At the bigger schools I was at, they just rented an ice truck and they just backed it right up to the tub.
Hell yeah, there you go. Cool. Well, so a lot of great stuff to unpack in this episode. Again, if you are not doing those big three, we're going to continue to fight an uphill battle when it comes to recovery. So hammer in that eat, sleep, hydrate, and then we can look to expand on our recovery. But without those three, you're never going to truly make the progress that you want to make. If you guys are interested in training with us further, make sure to check out the link in the description. And also in the comments, drop what you want to hear us talk about next time, or any subject you are very interested in hearing about moving forward, and we'll make sure to record that for you guys. Thanks.